The Unbelievable Truth, 1989, by Hal Hartley. Hal Hartley is an interesting filmmaker, very unusual. He's an independent American filmmaker and he writes stylized, peculiar dialogue which the actors then have to perform in a very stylized, deadpan style, and he films in an unusual way. There's not many wide shots, or establishing shots to be more precise, and he poses the actors in very specific places. It's a very tableau style of presentation. He's at his best when he is being charming and amusing, and I think that at the start of his career, and The Unbelievable Truth is his debut feature movie, at the start of his career, that's when he's at his most charming and funny, and as his career progresses, I think he becomes less charming and less funny. And to be frankly honest, in my opinion, that is his strength, charming and funny. So I would argue that he starts at his best and with every movie goes down a wee bit in quality, I would say, as a general rule of thumb. I think his stuff can look a bit bland and unappealing to some people. If you can get over that initial slightly, do I really want to watch this deadpan strange movie? If you can get past that feeling, I think within a few minutes you'll start to get into its rhythm and start to enjoy what he is trying to achieve. And as I say, if you can find a charm in it, it will actually be quite highly charming, I think. And that's definitely one of his strengths. It has a very peculiar story. The subject matter's slightly different, off the beaten path. For example, the male lead character is thought of by the other characters as being a mass murderer, and he's walking around free after being released from prison. That is unusual subject matter. Combine that with a charming, offbeat, deadpan comic tone, and as you can see, it's certainly off the beaten path as far as subject matter is concerned, and I am a fan of eccentric, different, off the beaten path subject matter. Some of the dialogue is very amusing. I particularly like the circular conversation the lead character has with a waitress. The ending's a little bit weak. It has a bunch of characters all converging on the one house, and there is a lot of potential for confusion and misunderstandings of people's motivations. But it's almost like either Hal Hartley as a writer didn't know what to do or lost interest, and it never becomes the funny, interesting, peculiar, messed up situation that it promises to be. So the ending has a slightly anticlimactic feel to it. Also, the thing just sort of ends, which is fine, but it's not a especially satisfying climax. The ending does feel a little, is that it? The story has its own sort of rhythm and it does its own thing. I think it kind of maybe shows signs of not being well worked out in advance, and he was writing, Hal Hartley, who wrote it himself, was probably writing it pretty much as one scene at a time. He got to the end of one scene and was like, now what do I do next? Oh, I know what, I'll put these two characters together, they'll have a discussion, and in the writing of it he discovered, oh, such and such is going to happen now, or someone's going to reveal such and such. I just think you can, in my opinion, you can to some extent, and I could be totally wrong, tell that it was being made up as it went along, that it wasn't some master plan plot in his head. And that's fine, that is not a criticism, that is just an observation. And because it's a indie movie, the rough edges of the script have not been sanded down, which I think would probably happen in a traditional studio film. So the script is a little ragged around the edges. The movie was very low budget, and you can't really tell that, I think, watching it. Obviously, a lot of money was not spent on it. The lack of money does not hinder the movie. The film has quite a bit of scale to it. I enjoy this movie. I've seen it several times. I like it. It floats my boat. I like the movie. I think it's quite charming and quite amusing. I would give it 7 out of 10, meaning it is good. And this is probably his most charming and amusing movie, and with every movie the charm and the amusing drifted away a wee bit with every subsequent movie, in my opinion. But Hal Hartley, his early work from the very late 80s to the early 90s is certainly very interesting and worth investigating. As a filmmaker, his reputation disappeared, and he is very rarely talked about nowadays. And to be frankly honest with you, if you have seen any of his later work, you can tell definitely why his reputation has disappeared and why he rarely gets the money to make movies, because his later stuff appears to be truly terrible. He changed his style from this stylized, I don't know if his stylized dialogue and his stylized acting disappeared, but certainly visually he got really into videotape, and I've only seen one of his later movies. It's called The Girl from Monday, and it may literally be the very worst movie I have ever seen. It was stunningly bad. And if his other work is even remotely similar in style to that movie, The Girl from Monday 2005, then I would not touch his other work with a barge pole, and I don't think anyone else would ever. It's like very bad student filmmaking. Talking about student filmmaking, there is a slight whiff of first-time student filmmaker to this movie, especially because there are a couple of sound montages where they've done fancy things with the soundtrack for absolutely no good reason. The lead actress, Adrienne Shelley, wakes up and she goes, "Ah," but instead of getting the "ah" noise, we get the sound of, I assume, either a nuclear bomb exploding or, yeah, probably it was a nuclear bomb exploding. And sometimes the camera will be on her face and other people will be talking and their dialogue is repeated and overlapping. So someone starts talking and then there's a slight delay and then the dialogue that they're already saying is repeated 1 second out of sync. It's pointless, it adds nothing. Obviously it's supposed to convey her state of mind, all these people talking over her and all that type of stuff, but it does look like artsy fartsy student film making nonsense. This type of thing only happens maybe 3 times, maybe 4 at most in the whole entire movie, so this is not a big issue. I am just saying there are a few moments that seem a wee bit amateurish, like artsy fartsy film students mucking around. Not what you would expect in a proper professional movie. Is Hal Hartley similar to Jim Jarmusch, independent filmmakers who make deadpan movies? I would say yes, they are similar. I'm not a massive fan of Jim Jarmusch. His deadpan style is actually quite alienating. I think to a mainstream audience it's almost totally off-putting, and to me, I'm not a massive fan of just how deadpan it actually is. I also have major issues with Jim Jarmusch's slow pacing. Sometimes it's fine, but other times it can be really quite hard going. Also, Hal Hartley's deadpan style is nowhere near as deadpan and as alienating as Jim Jarmusch's. I would say that Jim Jarmusch's deadpan style doesn't really have any charm to it, whereas Hal Hartley, his deadpan style has quite a bit of charm, at least in the early days. As the movies progress, they become less charming. I will say this though, Jim Jarmusch has stayed the course and is, at the time of me making this, still producing movies, and his later work has been as strong or stronger than his earlier work, whereas Hal Hartley has apparently pretty much disappeared, and what little he has produced has been not very good. As I said, The Girl from Monday is shockingly bad, and if it is at all an indication of the other stuff he has done, and I assume he continued in this horrible videotape style, I shudder. I'm not kidding, this is one of the very worst movies I have ever seen. It is an amateurish student movie shot on horrible looking videotape